Jokic won't sign an extension with the Nuggets. Let's talk about that because that is definitely an interesting, story that came out. And then we'll talk about the latest Al Horford news and is Chris Paul retiring? So let's talk about those things in this video. So first, let's talk about the Jokic thing because I know my intro made you think, wait, Jokic doesn't want to extend with the Denver Nuggets? Well, it's a little bit clickbaity. Sorry to do that. But pretty much it is true that Jokic, told them that he will not extend this summer. But the reason is because next summer he can get about $80 million more dollars. So instead of getting the 206 3-year extension this summer, next summer he can extend for 284 million. So that's really the reason why he's not extending right now. Obviously, teams never want to hear that their star player doesn't want to extend. That obviously is not good news, and the Lakers are, currently dealing with that right now. I don't know what the talks are obviously between, the Lakers and Luka, but I believe on August 2nd, he is extension eligible. So they obviously are trying to get him extended, when August 2nd rolls around. So I don't know what those conversations are between the Lakers and Luka. It's obviously a completely different situation because Luka, didn't ask to be with the Lakers. He wanted to be with Dallas for his whole career. At least that's what it seemed like. And Jokic hasn't shown any, sign that he wants to leave Denver or anything like that. So I'm not saying Jokic wants to leave. Obviously, like I said, the big reason he didn't extend is the money. But I also do think there is a semblance, I guess, of him also wanting to see what happens with this season and the roster. Because they made some really good moves this offseason. We still have to wait to see what happens with Jonas Valanciunas. We don't know what's going to happen with that situation. So I think the main reason is obviously the monetary because $80 million is $80 million. But I also do think we know that Jokic wants to win. And like I said, they made some good moves this offseason, but if they get knocked out in the first or second round again, and then we go into the next offseason and they aren't able to acquire players to make the roster championship contender, Jokic may, again, I'm not saying he's leaving. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying after this season, depending on how it plays out, he may start thinking okay, we got to do something because I want to win more championships, right? So that's all I'm saying. Again, the main reason he didn't extend is because of the money. But I also do think he's waiting to see how this season plays out and their roster construction, next summer after this season. If they win a championship, then obviously all is, forgotten, right? Then obviously it's not going to be a story. But I'm just saying keep that in mind. Right now it's not really a story, but it is something to look out for, as the season goes on. So the next thing that I think we should talk about is Chris Paul. And it is kind of, I guess, ironic in a sense. Chris Paul apparently was hinting at, having only one more year left, maybe retiring after next year. That wasn't shocking to me, but we haven't really heard any news on where Chris Paul is going to end up. He's probably, if not guaranteed, going to play this season. The two places that have been rumored is him going back to the Clippers and him going back to the Suns, ironically. I think I saw a report that he wants to start and have a starting role. And so I believe, one, that would be a reason why he wouldn't want to go back to San Antonio because, fair enough, De'Aaron Fox is starting for sure over him, right? So he's not going to have a starting role in San Antonio. With the Clippers and the Suns, it's interesting. Obviously, they're both reunions, so that is something, two teams he's familiar with. With the Clippers, because you have James Harden who, is playing the point guard position for them, and he's been, doing it very well. So does that mean you're sliding James Harden back to the 2, which was his, original natural position or whatever, even though he obviously can play both and stuff like that? But he was a 2 guard. So are you moving Chris Paul back to the 1 and having James Harden, play the 2 again and be more off ball and be more of a scorer? But James Harden likes to have the ball in his hands, right? And Chris Paul is going to have the ball in his hands if he's the point guard. So, and they played together in Houston, if you don't remember. So that would be something they have to work out unless you bring Chris Paul off the bench. But again, I saw a report that I think he wants to start. I'm not saying he wouldn't come off the bench. That's not what I'm saying. But, like, I feel like, again, the report said he wanted to start. So, like, if that's the case, then I feel like the Suns would make more sense for him. Because what are the Suns looking for? As they've been looking for since Chris Paul left, a point guard. Now, shout out to Tyus Jones. I liked when they brought him in last year. He is a very solid point guard. Didn't work out. But literally since Chris Paul has left, they've been looking for a point guard. So if he goes to the Suns, he probably is going to start again and have that point guard role. And, he played well with Devin Booker. And we know they had their best years with Chris Paul. Now, granted, that was like 3-4 years ago. I understand Chris Paul is older now. And they don't have Mikal Bridges anymore. And DeAndre Ayton was on that team. And it was a different team. So I get that. I'm not saying if they get Chris Paul, they're going to the finals. I'm not saying that. I think this team definitely has, work to do in terms of the Suns. And then we got to see what's going to happen with the Bradley Beal buyout. He's probably going to get bought out, just a matter of when. But if they get Chris Paul to come back and be their point guard, listen, say what you want about Chris Paul. He hasn't won a ring. Somehow something always happens in the playoffs, unfortunately, an injury, just like something prevents him from getting to the next level. But in the regular season, every team that Chris Paul is on succeeds. Like, they do better than maybe anticipated, and they just turn into a good team. Last year with the Spurs, I'm not going to, fault him for that. Like, Victor Wembanyama was out, half the season, and, like, that's not his fault. But, like, when he was with OKC, with Shea, like, when Shea got to OKC, and Shea wasn't the MVP and stuff like that yet, Chris Paul was there. And people didn't expect that team to really, make any kind of noise or do anything. Now, did they go to the finals? No. But, like, that team way exceeded expectations, and Chris Paul was one of the catalysts of that. So, again, that was a while ago. Chris Paul obviously was more in his prime then. So, again, I'm not saying Chris Paul is going to have that same impact. But if I'm the Suns, at least I feel good knowing that our team will be better in the regular season if Chris Paul is there. Like, he just somehow knows how to do that, right? So, if you're the Suns, it's going to be a 1-year deal with Chris Paul most likely. And I don't dislike that for them. Like, I think even though they say they want to, contend with Devin Booker right now, I still think it has to be at least a couple year rebuild because of, the trade with Kevin Durant and the buyout with Bradley Beal. And because they're going to waive and stretch Bradley Beal's money after they buy him out, they're going to probably owe the max the same way that the Bucks owe $22.5 million for Damian Lillard for the next 5 years. It's a little bit under the 15%, cap limit because you can only have 15% in dead cap space. So Bradley Beal this is also why it's tricky. Bradley Beal has to agree to take less money in order for them to do it because they already have Nasir Little and somebody else. I don't know why I always forget who the other person is, but they already have a couple of people on the books for like $3 million or something. I think it might be $3 million each or something like that. So Bradley Beal has to agree to take like $97 million. So that's the first hurdle. He has to take less. I think they'll get to that point, and that's, I think we're at that point where he's going to agree to less money. But with that being said, in the end, the Suns are going to be having 15% in dead cap space. Like, they're going to max it out, right? So they're going to have the same issue as the Bucks, where, like, every year on their salary books, on their books, they're going to have this 22.5 sort of million that they can't do like, there's no player, there's no roster spot, it's just money. And so that's always going to limit their ability to make moves. With that being said, though, like I said, I think it's a couple-year rebuild with Devin Booker. I like the addition of Chris Paul because, again, he just does good things when he goes places. Again, we could talk about the playoff, success and stuff like that. But in terms of, like, making the regular season better, And again, I think it's a couple year rebuild anyway. Like, I don't think the Suns would be ready to contend next year anyway. I don't mind adding Chris Paul. So that's my opinion on Chris Paul. And then we talk about, I said Al Horford. Okay. Al Horford. So it came out a report today, I believe, that Al Horford is likely leaving the Celtics, which I feel like we all kind of knew already. Which I feel like is kind of sad in a way, just because we all associate Al Horford as a Celtic. Like, the funny thing is, he has not always been a Celtic. I know that people associate him with the Celtics, but he was not always a Celtic. He was an Atlanta Hawk. Like, I'm pretty sure he was on that Atlanta Hawks team in like 2014, 2015, that won like 60 games, and they were the #1 seed. And that team had Kyle Korver, Paul Millsap. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was the team. So like, he was not always a Boston Celtic, but it is kind of funny that we all associate him with the Celtics. So it does seem like it's kind of the end of an era, so to speak, for Horford with the Celtics. And that's mainly because, in my opinion, just because Jason Tatum tore his Achilles, which obviously is nobody's fault. But if Al Horford might retire after this season, I think he wants to go out, maybe try to get another ring. And again, if Jason Tatum didn't tear his Achilles, I think he might have stayed, because then they would have a chance to contend. But because they probably don't, next season, I think it makes sense. And I don't think anybody should be upset at him for leaving. And I think everybody understands the situation. Again, I don't know, him. I don't know what he's feeling, but I feel like that's kind of where his head is at. The reports are that he's likely going to the Warriors still. I feel like a lot of what is being held up for the Warriors specifically, and maybe Al Horford signing, is the Jonathan Kuminga thing. Because I believe, I can't remember which way it is. I don't know if they sign Al Horford first before the Kuminga thing, then they're hard capped, or if they sign Kuminga first, then there's something about like a way that they have to do it, or they're hard capped. And so that, I feel like, is why Al Horford has not signed to the Warriors yet, because I think he's going to end up there. There's something about the way that they have to do it so it doesn't end up being a hard cap, at least right away. So that is what I think they're waiting on, the Jonathan Kuminga situation. And they're likely going to, talk during Summer League, which is happening, stuff like that. So so that's what's going to happen. During Summer League, we're going to, Las Vegas and whatever, they're going to, I guess, work out a deal and figure out, what to do with the Jonathan Kuminga situation. And then we'll probably see more movement on Al Horford. Speaking of the Warriors, there was another report that came out that DeAnthony Melton is likely to sign back with the Warriors. If you didn't watch last year, he was on the Warriors, and unfortunately, he only played 5-10 games, and then he tore his ACL. I think it was a partial tear, but it was a season-ending injury, unfortunately. And he was a perfect fit. He was exactly what the Warriors were looking for. And it was a small sample size, but when he was on the floor, they were awesome. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was good numbers. And they looked really good when he was out there. But it was just unfortunate he got hurt, and that was why they traded him. They didn't want to trade him. They wanted him to play, but unfortunately he got hurt. And so the report is that he's likely going to sign back. But again, I think we're all, or when I say we all, when I think what DeAnthony Melton and Al Horford are waiting on is the Jonathan Kuminga situation, because they have to figure out what's going to happen there. So that's really the breaking news. There is one other thing with San Antonio. Somebody said, oh, it's going too fast. I missed it. I was going to read a comment, but it went too fast. Sorry. What was I going to say? Oh, so the last thing I wanted to say was there actually was a small trade that happened today that kind of just went under the radar. And that is that Kelly Olynyk is going to the San Antonio Spurs. And it was a deal for Malachi Branham, a second-round pick, and somebody else. I forgot who, so sorry. I think it was Blake Wesley. Yeah, that's who it was. And so Kelly Olynyk is going to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's not a big deal. That's not a huge groundbreaking trade. Fair enough. This is not Kevin Durant being traded or LeBron, right? However, the Spurs are slowly just like adding pieces, building up their roster. Like they're doing it slowly. They still have a ton of, assets. They still have, I think, 5 first-round picks they could trade. The Houston Rockets have 5 for sure. I'm not sure if maybe the Spurs have 3 now after the De'Aaron Fox trade. They still have a bunch of picks. They still have a ton of young guys. I don't think they would want to include Stephon Castle in any trades at all, but they still have a bunch of young guys with upside that they could move for some other players. And so they're in a really good position. And the thing about Kelly Olynyk is, again, no, it's not, again, the Kevin Durant trade, LeBron, Giannis. It's not that kind of trade. But I feel like Kelly Olynyk somehow got polarizing too, and I don't really understand how he became a polarizing player. Because I feel like he always just did his job. Like, yeah, he was never going to put up crazy stats, but I feel like he always did his thing. Like, he was just solid out there to me, and I didn't understand how somehow, I don't know if I'm making this up, but I feel like I saw the, discussion around Kelly Olynyk turn to like that he's polarizing now. I don't get it. But the point is, like, it's just another solid player to add to the roster. And my point is that the Spurs are just slowly adding solid players on the roster to make them better. And when the time comes, they will make a move to whatever, make this team a championship contender, whatever player it is. Like, they are holding on to certain assets for a certain player. Whether that be Giannis, potentially, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like Giannis is going to ask out anytime soon right now. But even if it's not Giannis, like, there are other good players out there who maybe next summer, like, because remember, Victor Wembanyama is only like 21, 22. Like, I feel like maybe we all forgot a little bit that he only played 2 years in the league, right? And really 1.5 because he didn't play after All-Star break. So Victor Wembanyama has, like, if he stays healthy, a 17-year career, which means he has 15 years left to win. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I feel like people started to, and me included, because I feel like Victor Wembanyama has gotten so good so fast, and I don't see any reason to wait, quote unquote. That's why they made the De'Aaron Fox move, because it made sense. Because they didn't have to give up, gut their roster, and they still got a really good player in De'Aaron Fox. So I feel like I agree. They should be starting to go for it. And if they see a move out there that makes sense, then obviously do it. But I'm saying, like, I don't think they should just rush and just pick a player when they have, 15 years or whatever of Victor Wembanyama left. So if there is a player out there who is going to, change their roster to be a championship contender, then I think they might make that move. But we'll just have to wait and see what the Spurs do. But keep your eye out for them because they are slowly, doing their thing. It's kind of like OKC, but a little bit different because obviously OKC, drafted Chet and Jalen, and obviously Shea Turner's the MVP and stuff like that. But, like, I feel like the Spurs are just, slowly getting along, and it's just going to come one day where, oh, the Spurs are the contenders. You know what I'm saying? Like, just keep your eye out for them. I feel like they're slowly moving, up in the standing, so to speak. Not that I know where they're going to be next season. The West is loaded. Everybody's trying to compete. I think every team in the West is trying to compete, which is insane. So that's my opinion on that. Thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoyed, and see you soon.